You're not really family anymore, Margaret. Just sign the papers and step aside. I smiled through my tears that night, but what I did 3 days later made them realize they had pushed the wrong 70-year-old woman too far. I'm glad you're here with me today. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds, and comment below what city you're watching from so I can see how far my story reaches. At 70 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I'd buried my beloved husband Theodore 6 years ago after 47 years of marriage. I'd survived breast cancer at 62. I'd watched my childhood friends pass away one by one, leaving me with memories and photograph albums filled with faces that existed now only in my heart. I'd even survived the loneliness of widowhood, learning to sleep alone in a bed meant for two, learning to cook meals for one, learning to exist in a world without my other half. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day my own son's mistress tried to erase me from my own family home. The Whitmore estate. That's what everyone in Riverside County called it, though the official address was 1847 Magnolia Boulevard, Millbrook Heights. The house had been built in 1889 by my great-grandfather, Cornelius Whitmore, a timber baron who'd made his fortune in the logging industry before the turn of the century. 3 stories of Victorian grandeur with turrets and gingerbread trim, wraparound porches, and stained glass windows that caught the afternoon sun and scattered rainbows across the hardwood floors. My grandmother Beatrice had raised 7 children within these walls. My mother Eleanor had planted the rose garden that still bloomed every spring, over 200 bushes in varying shades of pink, red, and white. My father had restored the carriage house and turned it into a workshop where he'd spent his retirement years building furniture that still graced the rooms of family members scattered across 3 states. And I had raised my son here. Daniel Theodore Whitmore. Born on a snowy February morning in the master bedroom upstairs, the same room where I'd been born 30 years earlier. I'd walked him to his first day of kindergarten from this house. I'd watched him learn to ride his bicycle on the circular driveway. I'd photographed him in his tuxedo before prom on the front steps. This house wasn't just wood and nails and historical architecture. It was the physical manifestation of 4 generations of Whitmore family history. It was mine. And now someone wanted to take it from me. The trouble started on a Saturday afternoon in July. Not just any Saturday, July 14th, which happened to be what would have been my 48th wedding anniversary with Theodore. I'd spent the morning at Riverside Memorial Gardens, placing fresh lilies on his grave and telling him about the grandchildren he'd never gotten to meet because our son had waited until his father was gone to start a family. When I returned home around noon, I'd decided to spend the afternoon doing something that brought me joy. Baking. The kitchen in the Whitmore estate was my sanctuary. Modern appliances mixed with vintage charm, the original 1920s blue and white tile backsplash that my grandmother had installed, the butcher block island that Theodore had built for our 20th anniversary, the industrial-sized range that I'd purchased 10 years ago when I'd started catering small events for the Millbrook Historical Society. I was rolling out pie dough for my grandmother's famous buttermilk pie when I heard the distinctive crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. I glanced at the clock. 2:15. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the kitchen window, I watched a sleek black Mercedes SUV pull up to the house. The driver's side door opened and my son Daniel emerged, dressed in what I'd come to recognize as his important business meeting outfit, tailored navy suit, crisp white shirt, Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. But it was the passenger who made my stomach clench. Simone Carrington Derringer. Even her name sounded pretentious. She stepped out of the vehicle like she was walking a red carpet, her movements calculated and graceful. She wore a white linen dress that hugged her figure perfectly, nude Louboutin heels that clicked against the driveway pavement, and oversized designer sunglasses that hid half her face. Her honey blonde hair was styled in loose waves that looked effortlessly perfect but probably required an hour with a professional stylist and $200 worth of product. She was 37 years old. Exactly 30 years younger than Daniel's wife. Ex-wife, I should say. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Simone had started as Daniel's executive assistant at his commercial real estate development firm, Whitmore Properties Group, about 14 months ago. Within 3 months, she'd been promoted to Director of Strategic Acquisitions. Within 6 months, Daniel's wife Claire had moved out of their home in Oakwood Estates with their 3 children, my grandchildren, after discovering text messages that left no doubt about the nature of Daniel's relationship with his director. The divorce had been ugly. Claire had hired one of the best attorneys in the state, and Daniel had ended up paying dearly for his infidelity. The house in Oakwood Estates went to Claire. His investment portfolio was split down the middle. He was paying substantial child support and alimony. And most of his liquid assets had been tied up in the settlement. Which explained, I realized with growing dread, why he was here. I wiped the flour from my hands and removed my apron, draping it over the back of a kitchen chair. Through the window, I watched Daniel and Simone approach the side entrance, the one that led directly into the mudroom and then to the kitchen. The same door Daniel had used as a child, bursting in after school with scraped knees and stories about his day. "Mom." Daniel's voice rang out as the door opened. Too loud. Too cheerful. The kind of artificial brightness that meant he was nervous about something. "Are you home?" "In the kitchen, sweetheart," I called back, using the endearment out of habit even though my heart was already starting to race with anxiety. They appeared in the doorway, and I was struck by how out of place Simone looked in my kitchen. This was a room that smelled like cinnamon and butter, where flour dust permanently coated the corners of the counters, where generation-old copper pots hung from the ceiling rack. Simone belonged in minimalist spaces with marble countertops and statement lighting, not in my grandmother's kitchen with its cheerful blue tiles and the slightly crooked cabinet doors that Theodore had never gotten around to fixing. "Something smells amazing," Daniel said, moving forward to kiss my cheek. His cologne was different, something expensive and sharp that Simone had probably picked out. Claire had always said he smelled like soap and coffee, comfortable and familiar. This new scent was aggressive, trying too hard. "Buttermilk pie," I said, managing a smile. "Your grandmother's recipe." I was feeling nostalgic. "How lovely," Simone said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes so pale blue they were almost gray. Beautiful eyes, I had to admit, though they were cold. Calculating. "You're quite the baker, aren't you, Margaret?" "Not Mrs. Whitmore. Not even Daniel's mother. Just Margaret, as if we were peers. As if she had the right to address me so casually." "I enjoy it," I said carefully. "Would you like some iced tea? I made a pitcher this morning. Sweet tea, the way we make it in the South." "Actually, Mom," Daniel interjected, shooting Simone a quick glance, "we were hoping we could sit down and talk with you about something. Something important. Maybe in the formal living room? This is kind of well, it's a business matter." "Sort of." My mouth went dry. "A business matter?" "It's about the house," Simone said bluntly, earning a sharp look from Daniel. "We might as well be direct, darling. Your mother deserves honesty." "Darling." She called my son darling in front of me, in my kitchen, in my house. The casual intimacy of it felt like a slap. "The living room might be better," Daniel repeated, already moving toward the hallway. "Come on, Mom. Please." I followed them through the house, watching Simone's eyes catalog everything we passed. The family photo gallery in the hallway, for generations of Whitmore family portraits. The antique sideboard in the dining room that had been shipped from England in 1904. The oriental runner in the main corridor that my mother had purchased on a trip to Turkey in 1965. She was appraising everything, I realized. Putting a price tag on my family's history. The formal living room was at the front of the house, overlooking the circular driveway and the ancient oak trees that lined Magnolia Boulevard. It was the room we'd always reserved for important occasions, Christmas mornings, Easter dinners, the wake after Theodore's funeral. The furniture was a mix of genuine antiques and comfortable pieces that had accumulated over decades. The fireplace mantel was hand-carved walnut that Theodore had spent 6 months restoring to its original glory. The bay windows featured the original leaded glass from 1889. Simone settled into the burgundy wingback chair, my chair, the one where I always sat, as if she owned it. She crossed her legs at the ankle in that way wealthy women are taught, probably at the same finishing school where she'd learned to look down her nose at people. From her designer handbag, I recognized it as Hermes, probably $30,000. She pulled out a leather portfolio embossed with gold lettering. Daniel sat on the Chesterfield sofa, perched on the edge like he was ready to bolt. He still wasn't meeting my eyes. I remained standing, my back straight, my hands clasped in front of me. Some instinct told me I needed the height advantage for whatever was coming. Margaret, Simone began, opening her portfolio and pulling out several documents. As Daniel mentioned, we wanted to talk to you about the house. About the estate, really. The entire property. What about it? I asked, though I already knew where this was going. I could feel it in my bones. Well, the reality is that this house is simply enormous. 12,000 square feet, if the property records are correct. 7 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, multiple living spaces, the carriage house, the gardens. And it's just you here, rattling around in all this space. I'm not rattling around, I said quietly. I'm living in my home. Of course, Simone said, her smile practiced and empty. But you have to admit, Margaret, that it's a tremendous amount of space for one person. And the maintenance, the property taxes alone must be staggering. What are they now, around $40,000 a year? $42,000, I said automatically, then wished I hadn't. I'd given her information she could use against me. Exactly. Simone leaned forward, warming to her subject. $42,000 a year just in property taxes. Then there's insurance, what, another $15,000 for a property this size? Utilities, maintenance, landscaping, repairs on a house this old. You're probably spending close to $100,000 a year just to keep this place running. I manage just fine, I said, my voice tight. Do you, though? Simone tilted her head, feigning concern. Daniel tells me you've been dipping into the principal of your investment accounts to cover expenses. That's not sustainable, Margaret. At your age, you need to be preserving capital, not depleting it. I shot a look at Daniel, who at least had the grace to look ashamed. He'd been discussing my finances with his mistress. Private information about my accounts, my spending, my situation. How I manage my money is my business, I said. Mom, please, Daniel finally spoke up. We're just worried about you. This house is too much. You're 70 years old. What if you fell on the stairs? What if something happened and you were here alone and no one found you for days? I have a medical alert system, I countered. And I speak to my friends every day. Your concern is touching but unnecessary. Is it, though? Simone interjected. Because from what Daniel tells me, you've been increasingly isolated. Most of your friends have passed away or moved to retirement communities. You rarely leave the house except for groceries and your volunteer work at the Historical Society. That's not healthy, Margaret. Isolation in elderly people can lead to depression, cognitive decline, even early mortality. Elderly people. She said it so casually, as if she was discussing a demographic in a research paper rather than the woman sitting across from her. I'm not isolated, I said, fighting to keep my voice level. I have a full life. I have friends, activities, responsibilities. Responsibilities like maintaining a property that's clearly becoming too much for you, Simone said, her smile never wavering. Which brings us to why we're here today. Daniel and I have been doing a lot of planning for our future together. We're getting married next April, did Daniel tell you? She held up her left hand, and I saw for the first time the diamond ring glittering on her finger. 3 carats at least, emerald cut, probably worth more than a car. When had that happened? Had Daniel even planned to tell me he was engaged? Congratulations, I managed to say, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Thank you. We're very excited. And as we've been planning our life together, we've realized that this house, the Whitmore estate, it's the perfect place for us to start our new chapter. To raise the family we're planning. The family they're planning. As if Daniel's 3 existing children didn't count. As if Claire and the kids living in Oakwood Estates had been erased from the story. This house has always been meant for family, Simone continued. Your great-grandfather built it for his family. Your grandparents raised their children here. You raised Daniel here. And now it's time for the next generation to take their place. It's time for Daniel to come home. He has a home, I said quietly. Or he did, before he destroyed his marriage. Daniel's face flushed red. That's not fair, Mom. You don't know what my marriage to Claire was like. I know that you have 3 children who need their father, I shot back. I know that Claire was devoted to you for 15 years before you threw it all away for. I stopped myself, but the damage was done. For me, Simone finished, her voice cooling several degrees. You were going to say, for me, weren't you? Well, let me be very clear, Margaret. Daniel and I are in love. What he had with Claire was a mistake that he's correcting. Sometimes marriages end. It's unfortunate, but it's life. And Daniel and I are building something new, something better. We deserve a fresh start. And that fresh start requires my house? I asked. It's not just your house, though, is it? Simone pulled out one of the documents from her portfolio. According to the property records, this house was held in joint tenancy with your late husband Theodore. When he died, ownership transferred to you. But morally, emotionally, this house belongs to the entire Whitmore family. It's Daniel's heritage too. My husband left this house to me in his will, I said firmly. The deed is in my name. Only my name. Yes, we're aware of that, Simone said, exchanging a glance with Daniel. Which is why we're here today. We wanted to have an honest conversation with you about transferring the deed to Daniel. It makes sense on every level, Margaret. You're overwhelmed by the maintenance and costs. You're isolated here. You'd be so much happier in a community with people your own age, activities designed for seniors, medical care readily available. A senior living facility, I said flatly. An independent living community, Daniel corrected quickly. Mom, we've been looking at options for you. There's a beautiful place called Riverside Meadows about 20 minutes from here. We went and toured it last week. You toured senior living facilities for me? Without even asking me first. We wanted to have concrete options to present, Simone said smoothly. We're trying to help you, Margaret. We're trying to make this transition as easy as possible for you. Transition. The word felt heavy in my mouth. You mean being pushed out of my own home? No one's pushing you out, Daniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. We're offering you a solution that benefits everyone. You'll be safe and cared for. Simone and I will have space for our future. And the house stays in the Whitmore family. Everyone wins. Except I lose my home, I said. Simone sighed, as if I was being deliberately difficult. Margaret, let me be direct with you. You're 70 years old. You're living alone in a 12,000 square foot house that's draining your resources. At your age, the smart thing, the responsible thing, is to downsize. To simplify. To let the younger generation take over the family legacy while you enjoy your golden years without the burden of property management. My golden years, I repeated. Is that what you call it when you're forced out of your home by your son and his mistress? Former mistress, Simone corrected coolly. I'm Daniel's fiancée now. Soon to be his wife. Soon to be family. Which means this house will be my home too. The audacity of it took my breath away. This woman, who had destroyed my son's marriage, who had barely known him for over a year, was sitting in my living room telling me that my home would soon be hers. No, I said simply. Simone's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. No. No. I'm not transferring the deed. I'm not moving to a senior facility. I'm not giving up my home so you can play mansion with my son. The answer is no. Daniel stood up, his face flushed. Mom, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to help you. Help me? I felt my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You want to help me, Daniel? How about visiting your mother more than once every 3 months? How about calling to check on me occasionally? How about not discussing my private finances with your girlfriend? Fiancé, Simone corrected again, standing as well. Her composure was starting to crack, just slightly. And I can see that this conversation is becoming too emotional. Perhaps we should give you some time to think about this, Margaret. Time to really consider what's best for you. What's best for me is staying in my home, I said firmly. Is it though? Simone's voice turned sharp. Let me paint you a picture, Margaret. You're 70 years old. You have no income except Social Security and whatever your investments generate, and those investments are being depleted rapidly by the costs of maintaining this house. In 5 years, maybe less, you're going to run out of money. Then what? You'll lose the house anyway, but to the bank or the tax collector instead of to your own son. That's not going to happen, I said, but doubt crept into my voice. It will if you keep living beyond your means, Simone countered. But if you transfer the deed to Daniel now, you'll have peace of mind. You'll know the house is secure in the family. You'll be able to live comfortably in a community designed for your needs. And Daniel and I can take over the financial burden of maintaining the property. It's the smart choice, Margaret. The only sensible choice. For you, maybe, I said. Not for me. Simone closed her portfolio with a snap. Well, I can see that you need more time to think about this. We'll leave you to consider your options. But Margaret, I hope you'll be realistic. You can't stay here forever. Better to make this transition on your own terms rather than being forced into it later when you have no choice. She turned to Daniel. Come on, darling. Let's give your mother some space to think clearly about her future. They moved toward the door, and I followed them, my legs feeling unsteady beneath me. At the front entrance, Daniel paused and turned back to me. Mom, he said softly, and for just a moment I saw a flicker of the boy I'd raised. Please think about what we said. I don't want to fight with you. I just want what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone, I repeated. Or what's best for you and Simone? He didn't answer. He just followed Simone out to the Mercedes, and I stood in the doorway of my house, watching them drive away. The rest of that day passed in a haze. I went through the motions, finishing the pie, cleaning the kitchen, watering the roses, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying the conversation, hearing Simone's dismissive tone, seeing Daniel's refusal to meet my eyes. That night, I sat in the formal living room as darkness fell outside. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in my chair, the one Simone had claimed earlier, and tried to understand how my life had reached this point. My son wanted to take my house. My home. The place where 4 generations of Whitmores had lived and died and loved and fought and built their lives. He wanted to install his mistress in my place, to erase me from the family narrative as if I was nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to his new life. I thought about Theodore, about what he would say if he were here. He'd always been protective of the house, had seen it as his duty to maintain the Whitmore legacy. What would he think of his son trying to push his own mother out? The more I sat there in the darkness, the more I realized something important. I couldn't fight this alone. Daniel and Simone had clearly been planning this for a while. They'd done research, toured senior facilities, discussed my finances. This wasn't an impulsive conversation. This was a coordinated campaign. Which meant I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. The next morning, I called my bank, Riverside First National, where the Whitmore family had done business for 3 generations. I asked to speak to Gerald Morrison, the senior vice president who had handled Theodore's estate after his death. Mrs. Whitmore, Gerald said warmly when he came on the line. How wonderful to hear from you. What can I do for you today? Gerald, I need to ask you something confidential. Has anyone been making inquiries about my accounts recently? My son, perhaps, or anyone acting on his behalf. There was a pause. Mrs. Whitmore, you know I can't discuss specific inquiries without your permission. I'm giving you permission. Has Daniel been asking about my accounts? Another pause, longer this time. About 3 months ago, Daniel came in with a woman. I believe he introduced her as his fiancée. They asked me several questions about your account structures, your investment portfolio, your monthly expenses. He said they were helping you with financial planning. My hand tightened on the phone. What did you tell them? Nothing specific, of course. Client confidentiality prevents me from discussing account details without your written authorization. But I did confirm general information, that you maintained several accounts with us, that your primary income came from Social Security and investment dividends, that sort of thing. Nothing that would compromise your privacy. I hope I didn't overstep. No, Gerald. You did everything right. Thank you for telling me. After I hung up, I sat at Theodore's old desk in the study, staring at the built-in bookshelves filled with family photographs and heirlooms. They'd been planning this for months. Researching my finances. Looking at senior facilities. Building their case. The truly terrifying question was, what would they do when I continued to refuse? I got my answer 3 days later. It was a Tuesday morning, July 17th. The mail came around 11, and I walked down the driveway to the mailbox as I did every day. Among the usual bills and advertisements was a large manila envelope from Bradford and Associates, attorneys at law. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a legal petition, stamped and filed with the Riverside County Superior Court. At the top, in bold letters, petition for appointment of conservator. I had to read it 3 times before the words made sense. Daniel Theodore Whitmore was petitioning the court to be appointed as my legal conservator, my guardian, on the grounds that I was no longer mentally competent to manage my own affairs. The petition cited my advanced age of 70 years, my isolation and lack of social support, my inability to properly maintain property and manage finances, and my declining cognitive function as evidenced by poor decision-making regarding asset preservation. It was all lies. Calculated, deliberate lies designed to make me look incompetent. But attached to the petition was a second document that made my blood run cold. It was a proposed order for the court to transfer the deed of 1847 Magnolia Boulevard, my home, from my name to Daniel's name, for protective purposes, to prevent the elderly ward from being taken advantage of by unscrupulous individuals or making decisions detrimental to her financial security. They weren't asking any more. They were trying to have me declared incompetent so they could legally steal my house. The hearing was scheduled for 4 weeks from that day. August 15th. I had 1 month to fight the most important battle of my life. 1 month to prove I wasn't the helpless, confused old woman they were trying to paint me as. 1 month to save my home. I walked back to the house slowly, the legal papers clutched in my hand. My 70-year-old heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give out right there on the driveway. But alongside the fear, I felt something else stirring. Something I hadn't felt in years. Fury. Pure, crystalline rage at the injustice of it all. They thought I was weak. Helpless. An easy target. They were about to learn that Margaret Eleanor Whitmore was nobody's victim. The war had begun. And I intended to win. The conservatorship petition sat on my kitchen table like a coiled snake, ready to strike. I'd been staring at it for 2 hours, reading and rereading the allegations, each word more insulting than the last. Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, age 70, demonstrates clear signs of cognitive decline and is no longer capable of managing her considerable assets or making sound decisions regarding her welfare. The proposed ward has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, including refusal to accept reasonable assistance with property management and financial planning. Due to isolation and lack of family support following the death of her spouse, the proposed ward has become vulnerable to exploitation and is at significant risk of financial ruin. Every sentence was carefully crafted to paint me as a confused, failing old woman who needed to be saved from herself. The petition even included an affidavit from someone named Dr. Patricia Velasquez, a geriatric psychiatrist I'd never heard of, stating that based on her preliminary assessment of the case, I exhibited classic signs of age-related cognitive impairment and poor judgment. How could a doctor I'd never met assess my mental state? The answer came to me slowly, like poison spreading through water. Daniel must have described my symptoms to her: my refusal to move, my irrational attachment to the house, my inability to recognize that I was living beyond my means. He'd painted a picture of a delusional old woman, and this doctor had rubber-stamped his lies without ever speaking to me. I finally fell into a fitful sleep around 3 in the morning, still sitting at the kitchen table with the legal papers spread before me. When I woke with a start at 7, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and my neck ached from sleeping in the chair. My first coherent thought was that I needed help. Real help. Legal help. By 8 o'clock, I was showered, dressed in my best navy suit, the one I wore to Theodore's funeral, and driving toward downtown Millbrook Heights. The law offices of Catherine Reeves and Associates occupied the 3rd floor of the historic Riverside Building, a beautiful Art Deco structure from the 1930s. Catherine Reeves had handled Theodore's estate planning and will. She was 62 years old, sharp as a tack, and had a reputation for being fierce in the courtroom. More importantly, she knew me. She knew I wasn't some confused old woman who needed a guardian. Margaret, Catherine's assistant, a young woman named Ashley, looked surprised to see me without an appointment. "Is everything all right?" "I need to see Catherine immediately," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's an emergency. She's with a client right now, but let me." "Ashley, please. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't urgent." Something in my face must have convinced her, because she nodded and disappeared down the hallway. 5 minutes later, Catherine herself appeared, her reading glasses perched on her head, concern etched across her features. "Margaret? What's happened?" I held up the manila envelope. "My son is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can steal my house." Catherine's expression hardened. "Come to my office. Now." 20 minutes later, Catherine had read through the entire petition, her expression growing darker with each page. When she finished, she set the papers down and looked at me with a mixture of anger and determination. "This is one of the most offensive things I've seen in 30 years of practice," she said flatly. "Every single allegation in here is either a distortion or an outright lie. You're one of the most competent 70-year-olds I know. You volunteer at the Historical Society, you manage your own finances, you maintain that beautiful estate. There's absolutely no basis for conservatorship. Can he actually win?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Catherine leaned back in her chair, steepling her fingers. "Here's the reality, Margaret. Conservatorship cases are notoriously difficult to defend because the burden of proof is relatively low. Your son doesn't have to prove you're completely incapacitated, he just has to convince a judge that you need assistance managing your affairs. And judges tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to elderly individuals." My heart sank. "So I could lose?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," Catherine said firmly. "But we need to be strategic. First, we're going to file a response denying every single allegation. Second, we're going to get you evaluated by a real geriatric specialist, someone who will actually examine you and provide an honest assessment of your cognitive function. Third, we're going to gather evidence showing that you're perfectly capable of managing your own life." "What kind of evidence?" "Bank statements showing responsible financial management. Testimony from friends and colleagues about your daily activities and competence. Medical records from your regular doctor. Anything that proves you're not the person described in this petition." Catherine paused. "But Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Why is your son doing this?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. The visit from Daniel and Simone. The demand that I transfer the deed. The touring of senior living facilities behind my back. The investigation into my finances. Catherine's expression grew progressively more grim as I spoke. "So this is about the house," she said when I finished. "This isn't concern for your welfare, this is a property grab disguised as concern." "Yes. And this woman, Simone, she's been pushing this?" "I think she's the mastermind," I admitted. "Daniel would never have done this on his own. He's weak, Catherine. He's always been weak. But he's never been cruel. Not until her. Catherine made some notes on her legal pad. Okay. Here's what we're dealing with. Your son's fiancée wants the Whitmore estate. She's convinced him to file for conservatorship as a legal mechanism to force the transfer. If they succeed, Daniel will have legal control over all your assets, including the house. At that point, he can do whatever he wants, sell it, transfer it to himself, give it to Simone. You'll have no say in the matter. The reality of it hit me like a physical blow. I could lose everything. Not on my watch, Catherine said firmly. But Margaret, you need to understand that this is going to get ugly. Your son is going to have to testify about your alleged incompetence. He's going to have to provide examples of your supposed poor judgment. He's going to have to stand in front of a judge and say terrible things about you. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the little boy who used to crawl into my lap when he had nightmares. The teenager who'd come to me for advice about girls and college applications. The young man who'd cried in my arms when his first business venture failed. I don't have a choice, I said quietly. If I don't fight, I lose everything. At least if I fight, I have a chance. That's the spirit, Catherine said. She stood up and extended her hand. Consider yourself represented. We have 4 weeks to build our defense. Let's make them count. I left Catherine's office feeling slightly better, but the relief was short-lived. When I returned home around 11, there was a car parked in my driveway. Not the black Mercedes, a silver Lexus sedan that I didn't recognize. Simone was sitting on my front porch. She stood when she saw me, smoothing her cream-colored pencil skirt. Today she wore a silk blouse and pearls, looking every inch the respectable future Mrs. Whitmore. The costume didn't fool me. Margaret, she said, her smile brittle. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. We need to talk. I mind very much, I said coldly, walking past her toward my front door. And I have nothing to say to you. Please. She moved to block my path. Just 5 minutes. I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Against my better judgment, I paused. A misunderstanding? Is that what you call filing a conservatorship petition against me? That wasn't my idea, Simone said quickly. Too quickly. The lie was obvious. Daniel was worried about you. He thought it was the best way to protect you. Protect me by declaring me incompetent? By trying to steal my house? No one's trying to steal anything. Simone's voice took on that practiced, reasonable tone. Margaret, can we please go inside and talk like adults? I drove all the way out here because I want to resolve this without lawyers and courts and all this unpleasantness. I studied her carefully. She wanted something. Why else would she be here alone, without Daniel? 5 minutes, I said finally, unlocking the door. And only because I want to hear what you're really after. We went to the kitchen. I refused to let her into the formal living room again. I didn't offer her tea or coffee. I just stood with my arms crossed, waiting. Simone set her designer handbag on my kitchen counter and turned to face me. I'm going to be direct with you, Margaret, because I think you appreciate honesty. Daniel and I need this house. Not want, need. Do you know how much Daniel's divorce cost him? I know he had to pay for destroying his marriage, I said. He had to liquidate nearly everything, Simone continued, ignoring my barb. The settlement with Claire took the house, half his investment portfolio, ongoing child support and alimony. He's cash poor, Margaret. His business is leveraged to the maximum. We can't afford to buy a house in a neighborhood befitting our status. Befitting your status, I repeated slowly. So you want my house because you can't afford your own? We want the Whitmore estate because it's Daniel's birthright, Simone corrected. And because it makes financial sense. You can't afford to keep it. The property taxes alone are eating through your savings. You're what, 5 years away from bankruptcy? Maybe less? My finances are none of your business. They became my business when I agreed to marry into this family, Simone shot back. Look, Margaret, I'm trying to help you see reason. You're too proud to admit that you're drowning. But we can see it clearly. The house is too much for you. Your savings are depleting. In a few years, you'll be forced to sell anyway, probably in a distressed sale where you'll get a fraction of what it's worth. Why not transfer it to Daniel now, while you can still do it on your terms? On my terms? By being declared incompetent? Simone had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. That was premature. Daniel got anxious when you refused to consider the senior living community. He thought a legal framework might make things clearer. Clearer, I said. Is that what we're calling it? Margaret, please. Simone moved closer, her voice softening into something that might have sounded sincere to someone who didn't know better. I understand this is hard. I understand you love this house. But you have to be realistic. You're 70 years old. You're alone. This house is too big, too expensive, too much responsibility. Wouldn't you rather spend your remaining years somewhere safe, somewhere designed for your needs? My remaining years? I felt my anger rising. You make it sound like I'm dying. We all die eventually, Simone said with a shrug that was almost callous. But some of us are smart enough to plan for it. What happens to this house when you're gone, Margaret? Have you thought about that? It'll go to Daniel anyway. Why make him wait? Why make this harder than it needs to be? And there it was. The truth beneath all the concern and reasonableness. You want me to just give up, I said slowly. Hand over my house and disappear quietly into some senior facility so you can play Lady of the Manor. I want you to be sensible, Simone said. I want you to recognize reality. You can fight this conservatorship, Margaret. You can hire lawyers and drag this through court. But Daniel's going to win. Do you know why? Because judges look at a 70-year-old woman living alone in a 12,000 square foot house that's eating through her savings, and they see someone who needs help whether she admits it or not. That's not true. It is true, Simone interrupted. Fair or not, that's how the system works. Age discrimination is real, Margaret, and you're on the wrong side of it. The judge is going to look at Daniel, successful businessman, concerned son, offering to take responsibility for his aging mother, and then look at you, stubbornly refusing help, depleting your savings, isolated in a house too big for you. Who do you think he's going to side with? I wanted to argue, but part of me feared she was right. Catherine had said the burden of proof was low. What if the judge did see me as a stubborn old woman refusing reasonable help? Here's what I'm offering, Simone said, pulling a document from her handbag. Daniel and I had our lawyer draw this up last night. It's a voluntary transfer agreement. You sign over the deed to Daniel, and in exchange, he commits to covering all the costs of your care at Riverside Meadows for the rest of your life. You'll have a beautiful apartment, all meals provided, activities, medical care, everything you need. And you'll have the peace of mind knowing the house is staying in the family. She laid the document on my kitchen counter, and I saw it had signature lines for both me and Daniel, already notarized and ready to execute. All you have to do is sign, Simone said softly. Do this voluntarily, and Daniel will withdraw the conservatorship petition. No court. No ugly testimony. No public spectacle of your son having to testify about your incompetence. Just a quiet, dignified transfer from one generation to the next. I stared at the document. Part of me, a small, tired part, was tempted. It would be so much easier to just give in. To let them have the house. To stop fighting. But then I thought about my great-grandfather Cornelius, who'd built this house with his own fortune and hands. I thought about my grandmother Beatrice raising 7 children here. I thought about my mother's rose garden. I thought about Theodore dying in my arms in our bedroom upstairs. I thought about 4 generations of Whitmore family history, and how casually Simone wanted to erase my place in it. No, I said. Simone's expression hardened. No. I'm not signing anything. I'm not giving up my house. And I'm going to fight your conservatorship petition with everything I have. You're making a mistake, Simone said, her voice losing all pretense of warmth. You're going to lose, Margaret. And when you do, when Daniel is appointed your conservator, you'll have no say in where you live or what happens to your assets. At least if you do this voluntarily, you get something out of it. I get my dignity, I said firmly. I get to fight for what's mine. And I get to look myself in the mirror knowing I didn't roll over for a gold digger and her weak-willed accomplice. Simone's face flushed with anger. Gold digger? How dare you? How dare I? I felt my voice rising. You destroyed my son's marriage. You broke up his family. And now you want to push his mother out of her home so you can play house in a mansion you didn't earn and don't deserve. If that's not a gold digger, I don't know what is. Daniel loves me, Simone snapped. Daniel loves what you represent, I countered. Youth. Status. A chance to feel relevant again. But you don't love him, Simone. You love what he can give you. Or what you think he can give you. And what would you know about love? Simone grabbed her handbag, her composure finally cracking. You're a bitter old woman who's been alone for 6 years because your husband had the good sense to die and escape you. No wonder Daniel wants nothing to do with you. No wonder Claire left. Everyone who gets close to you eventually realizes you're just a mean, selfish woman who uses guilt and obligation to control people. The words hit me like slaps, each one designed to wound. But I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Gladly, Simone said, heading toward the door. But she paused in the doorway and turned back. You're going to lose everything, Margaret. The house, your son, your dignity, everything. And when you're sitting alone in whatever county facility they put you in because Daniel's not going to pay for Riverside Meadows after this, remember that I offered you a way out. Remember that you chose this. She left, and I stood in my kitchen trembling with rage and adrenaline. Through the window, I watched her peel out of my driveway, gravel spraying under her tires. My phone rang almost immediately. Daniel's number. Mom, what did you say to Simone? His voice was tight with anger. She just called me crying, saying you were horrible to her. I told her the truth, I said. That she's a gold digger trying to steal my house. She's trying to help you. We're both trying to help you, and you're being impossible. Daniel, she just tried to threaten me into signing over my house. She brought you a very generous offer that would take care of you for the rest of your life. An offer to push me into a nursing home so she can move into my house. It's not your house. Daniel's voice rose to a shout. It's the family house. It was Dad's house too, and Grandma's house, and Great-Grandpa's house. You don't own the Whitmore legacy, Mom. You're just the current occupant. The words cut deeper than anything Simone had said. Current occupant. As if I was just a tenant in my own home. Your father left this house to me, I said, my voice shaking. In his will. He wanted me to have it. He wanted the family to have it, Daniel shot back. He wanted it preserved for future generations. Not for you to selfishly hold onto while you drain your savings trying to maintain something you can't afford. I can afford. You can't. I've seen your bank statements, Mom. You're spending down your principal. In 5 years, maybe less, you'll be broke. Then what? The house gets seized for back taxes? Goes to foreclosure? Is that what Dad would have wanted? How dare you bring your father into this, I said, tears stinging my eyes. Theodore would be ashamed of what you're doing. Trying to have your own mother declared incompetent so you can steal her home for your mistress. Don't call her that. What else should I call her? The woman who destroyed your marriage? The woman who barely knows you but wants to live in your family home? What would your children think, Daniel? What would your daughter Emily think if she knew you were doing this to their grandmother? There was a long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice was cold. Don't bring my children into this. They don't need to know about your stubbornness. They don't need to know that their father is trying to steal from their grandmother. I'm not stealing anything. Daniel yelled. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. But you're too proud and too stubborn to see that you need help. Well, fine. If you won't accept help voluntarily, the court will force you to accept it. The conservatorship hearing is in 4 weeks, Mom. And I'm going to win. Then you won't have a choice. Catherine Reeves is representing me, I said. And we're going to fight this with everything we have. Catherine Reeves? Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, she's an estate planning attorney, not a litigator. She's going to get destroyed in court. Our lawyer is Harrison Blackwood from Blackwood, Sterling and Associates. He specializes in conservatorship cases. He's won over 50 of them. You don't stand a chance. We'll see, I said. Yes, we will. And Mom? When I win, when I'm appointed your conservator, I'm going to make the decisions that are best for you, whether you like them or not. You're going to Riverside Meadows. The house is being transferred to me. And you're going to live out your remaining years in safety and comfort, even if you're too stubborn to appreciate it. You mean I'm going to live in exile while you and your gold digger play house with my family legacy? Think whatever you want. But in 4 weeks, it won't matter what you think. I'll be in charge. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My son, my only child, the boy I'd raised alone after Theodore died, had just threatened to take everything from me. And the terrifying part was that he might succeed. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of normal life while my mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if Daniel did win? What if the judge sided with him? What if I really did end up in some facility, stripped of my home and my independence, declared incompetent by the very system that was supposed to protect me? That evening, I was sitting in the formal living room, had been sitting there for hours without really seeing anything, when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Whitmore, this is Jessica Pemberton. I'm a friend of Claire's. We need to talk about Daniel and Simone. I have information you need to hear. Can we meet tomorrow? This is urgent. I stared at the message for a long moment. Claire was Daniel's ex-wife. Why would her friend want to talk to me? And what information could she possibly have? But I was desperate. I needed allies, needed information, needed anything that might help me fight this battle. I texted back, tomorrow at 10 a.m. Riverside Diner on Main Street. The response came immediately, I'll be there. And Mrs. Whitmore? You're going to want to hear what I have to say. Trust me. I tried to sleep that night, but it was impossible. My mind kept spinning through possibilities. What did Jessica Pemberton know? Why had she reached out now? Could it somehow help my case? And underneath all of it, one question kept haunting me. How had my life become a war zone where my own son was the enemy? At some point near dawn, I must have dozed off, because I woke with a start to sunlight streaming through my bedroom windows and my phone alarm blaring. It was 8:30. I had 90 minutes to get ready and drive to the Riverside Diner. I dressed carefully in dark slacks and a simple blouse, something that looked put together but not try-hard. I wanted to look competent, capable, the opposite of the confused old woman Daniel was trying to paint me as. The Riverside Diner was a local institution, unchanged since the 1950s with its red vinyl booths and black and white checkered floor. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a booth in the back where we could talk privately. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman in her early 40s walked through the door. She was attractive in an understated way, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes that scanned the diner until they landed on me. She walked over with quick, purposeful steps. Mrs. Whitmore, she asked. Call me Margaret, please. And you must be Jessica. Thank you for meeting me. Jessica slid into the booth across from me, and I could see she was nervous, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her purse. I wasn't sure if you'd respond to my text, but I'm so glad you did. A waitress came by and we both ordered coffee. Neither of us was really interested in food. Once she left, Jessica leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Mrs. Whitmore, Margaret, I need you to know that Claire wanted to be here herself, but she's afraid. Afraid of Daniel, afraid of what he might do if he found out she was talking to you." "Afraid of Daniel?" I felt my stomach clench. "What do you mean?" "The divorce wasn't just about the affair," Jessica said. There was financial abuse. Emotional manipulation. Things that Claire was too ashamed to tell anyone about until it was over. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "Claire asked me to give you this. It's documentation of everything she discovered during the divorce proceedings. Everything Daniel tried to hide." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were bank statements, emails, legal documents, photographs. As I began to read, the picture that emerged made me feel sick. Daniel hadn't just been unfaithful to Claire. He'd been systematically draining their joint accounts to fund his affair with Simone. There were credit card statements showing charges at expensive hotels, jewelry stores, upscale restaurants, all during times when he'd told Claire he was on business trips. But worse were the emails. Messages between Daniel and Simone dating back 18 months, before Claire had even discovered the affair. They weren't just love letters. They were planning sessions. Strategy discussions. "We need to get the Whitmore estate," one email from Simone read. "That's the key to everything. Once we have the house, we can leverage it for the capital we need." Another from Daniel: "I'm working on Mom. She's stubborn, but I think I can convince her to move to Riverside Meadows. If I can't, we might need to explore other options." And then, from 3 months ago, the smoking gun: "Harrison Blackwood says a conservatorship petition is our best bet. We'll need medical documentation, but he can help us get that arranged. Once you're appointed conservator, the house is ours." I read the words over and over, my hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. This wasn't a recent decision made out of concern for my welfare. This was a calculated plan that had been in motion for months. Maybe longer. "There's more," Jessica said quietly. She pulled out another document. Claire's divorce attorney discovered that Daniel had been hiding assets. He claimed he was broke, but he had moved almost $200,000 into offshore accounts that he thought Claire wouldn't find. When confronted, he claimed it was business funds, but there was no documentation to support that. "He lied to the court," I said slowly. "Repeatedly." Claire's attorney was preparing to file contempt charges when Daniel suddenly agreed to a settlement. He was terrified of going to jail. So he gave Claire the house and most of the visible assets, but he kept the offshore money. Plus, he'd been skimming from his own business for years. There's at least $500,000 hidden somewhere that Claire could never trace. I looked up at Jessica. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Claire is terrified that Daniel is going to do the same thing to you," Jessica said. "She thinks, we both think, that once he has control of your assets through conservatorship, he's going to liquidate everything. Sell the Whitmore estate, empty your accounts, and hide the money where you'll never see it again. Then he'll claim the money was used for your care, and there won't be anything you can do about it because he'll be your legal guardian." The room seemed to spin around me. He would steal from me? His own mother? "He stole from his wife and children," Jessica said gently. "Why would he treat you any differently? Especially with Simone pushing him. That woman is poison, Margaret. She's the one behind all of this. Claire is convinced that Simone has some kind of hold over Daniel. Maybe she knows about the hidden money, maybe she's blackmailing him, we're not sure. But she's driving every decision he makes." I sat back in the booth, trying to process this information. My son wasn't just trying to take my house. He was planning to rob me blind. "Can I keep these documents?" I asked. "That's why I brought them," Jessica said. "Claire wanted you to have everything. She said to tell you that she's sorry she didn't speak up sooner, sorry she didn't warn you about Daniel's true nature. She thought maybe he'd be different with his own mother. But when she heard about the conservatorship petition, She realized he'd do the same thing to me. Yes. We sat in silence for a moment, my coffee growing cold in front of me. Finally, I looked at Jessica again. Is Claire willing to testify? At the conservatorship hearing? Jessica's face fell. She wants to, but she's terrified. Daniel has threatened to go after full custody of the kids if she causes any problems. He said he'd claim she's an unfit mother. It's an empty threat, he'd never win, but Claire is scared. She's been through so much already. I understand, I said, and I did. I couldn't ask a woman to risk her children, even to help me. But these documents, they might be enough. If I can prove that Daniel has a history of financial dishonesty, that he's hidden assets, that this conservatorship is really about accessing my estate, then maybe the judge will see the truth, Jessica finished. That's what Claire is hoping. She said to tell you to fight, Margaret. Fight with everything you have. Because once Daniel has control, you'll never get it back. I gathered up all the documents and put them carefully in my purse. Thank you, Jessica. And please thank Claire for me. Tell her I understand why she can't testify. Tell her I'm grateful for this information. It might just save my life. Jessica reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Claire always said you were the only good thing about her marriage to Daniel. She said you deserved better than a son like him. After Jessica left, I sat in the diner for another 20 minutes, drinking coffee and trying to organize my thoughts. I had evidence now, proof that Daniel had a history of financial fraud, proof that this conservatorship was premeditated, proof that he was working with Simone to steal my assets. But would it be enough? I called Catherine Reeves from the parking lot and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Margaret, this changes everything. Get to my office as soon as you can. We need to incorporate this information into our defense strategy immediately. As I drove toward downtown Millbrook Heights, I felt something I hadn't felt in days: hope. Daniel and Simone had made a mistake. They'd assumed I was alone, helpless, easy to manipulate. They'd forgotten that a cornered animal is always most dangerous when it has nothing left to lose. And I had everything to lose. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But now, at least, I had ammunition. Catherine's office was a flurry of activity when I arrived with the documents from Jessica. She had her paralegal, a sharp young man named Marcus, waiting with a scanner and laptop ready to catalog everything. This is gold, Margaret, Catherine said as she spread the documents across her conference table. Absolute gold. These emails alone prove premeditation. They show this conservatorship petition isn't about your welfare, it's about accessing your assets. But will a judge care? I asked, sinking into one of the leather chairs. The adrenaline from my meeting with Jessica was wearing off, leaving me exhausted. Daniel's lawyer has won 50 conservatorship cases. What if he convinces the judge that I really am incompetent, and these documents are just me being paranoid? Catherine looked at me over her reading glasses. That's why we're not going to wait for the hearing to make our case. We're going on the offensive. Marcus, how quickly can we file a motion to dismiss based on fraud and bad faith? Marcus looked up from his laptop. I can have it drafted by end of day, filed by tomorrow morning. Do it, Catherine said. And Margaret, I need you to do something that's going to be uncomfortable. I need you to start documenting everything. Every interaction with Daniel, every phone call, every text message. If Simone shows up at your house again, record it. Florida is a two-party consent state for recordings, so you'll need to tell them you're recording, but do it anyway. You want me to record conversations with my own son? I want you to protect yourself, Catherine said firmly. Daniel and Simone are building a narrative that you're incompetent and unreasonable. We need to build a counter-narrative that shows you're clear-headed, organized, and being systematically targeted by people who want your property. Documentation is how we do that. Over the next week, I threw myself into building my defense. Catherine arranged for me to be evaluated by Dr. Raymond Chen, a respected geriatric psychiatrist who specialized in competency assessments. The evaluation took 3 hours and included cognitive tests, memory assessments, and a detailed interview about my daily life and activities. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Chen said at the end of our session, making notes on his tablet, "I want to be very clear with you. Based on this evaluation, I see absolutely no signs of cognitive impairment. Your memory is excellent for your age. Your reasoning skills are sharp. Your judgment appears sound. I would never recommend conservatorship for someone with your level of functioning. Will you testify to that?" I asked. "Absolutely. And I'll be including in my report that the petition appears to be motivated by financial interests rather than genuine concern for your welfare. That's not a medical opinion, that's just my observation based on the circumstances." I left Dr. Chen's office feeling vindicated, but the victory was short-lived. That evening, I received an email from someone named Patricia Velasquez, the same doctor whose affidavit had been included in Daniel's original petition. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore," it read. "I recently became aware that my preliminary assessment was included in a conservatorship petition filed by your son. I want you to know that I never examined you personally, and my comments were based solely on a description of symptoms provided by Mr. Whitmore during a phone consultation. I was told you had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia and that the petition was uncontested. I have since learned this is not the case. I have contacted Mr. Whitmore's attorney to withdraw my affidavit and apologize for any distress this has caused you. Please know that I would never have provided an assessment without a proper examination had I known the true circumstances." I stared at the email in disbelief. Daniel had lied to the doctor. He'd told her I had dementia. He'd said the conservatorship was uncontested. He'd manipulated a medical professional into providing false testimony. I forwarded the email to Catherine immediately, and her response came within minutes. "This is even better than I hoped. He just handed us proof of fraud. I'm amending our motion to dismiss to include this." But while I was building my defense, Daniel and Simone were escalating their campaign. 3 days after my meeting with Jessica, I received a certified letter from Riverside County Adult Protective Services. An anonymous complaint had been filed claiming that I was living in dangerous conditions, neglecting my personal hygiene, and showing signs of self-neglect consistent with dementia. A caseworker named Linda Ramirez would be conducting a home visit within 48 hours to investigate. I called Catherine in a panic. "They're trying to make it look like I can't take care of myself." "Calm down, Margaret. This is actually a good thing. When the caseworker comes and sees that you're living perfectly fine, it'll be more evidence that Daniel's claims are false. But we need to make sure everything is perfect. I'm coming over tomorrow to help you prepare." Catherine arrived the next morning with Marcus and a checklist. They went through my house room by room, taking photographs of everything. The clean kitchen with organized pantry. The well-maintained bathrooms. The tidy bedrooms. The beautifully kept gardens. The organized home office where I paid my bills and managed my finances. "This house is immaculate," Marcus said, taking notes. "There's no way any caseworker could claim you're neglecting yourself or your property." When Linda Ramirez arrived for her inspection the following day, I was ready. I'd dressed carefully in clean, pressed clothes. I'd prepared tea and homemade cookies. I had all my financial records organized and ready to show her. Linda was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. She walked through my house slowly, taking notes, asking questions about my daily routine, my health, my social connections. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said finally, sitting with me in the formal living room, "I want to be honest with you. When I received this complaint, the allegations were quite serious. But everything I've seen today contradicts those claims. Your home is beautifully maintained. You're clearly taking care of yourself. Your financial records show responsible management. I see no evidence of self-neglect or diminished capacity. So you'll report that to the court?" I asked hopefully. "I'll file my report within the week." "And Mrs. Whitmore?" Linda hesitated, then continued. "Off the record, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen a lot of conservatorship cases. Some are necessary and appropriate. Others. She paused meaningfully. Others seem to be motivated by factors that have nothing to do with the alleged ward's welfare. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you to be careful. Make sure you have good legal representation. I do, I assured her. Catherine Reeves is my attorney. Linda's face brightened. Catherine's excellent. You're in good hands. After Linda left, I sat in my living room feeling a small measure of relief. The APS investigation would support my case. But I knew Daniel and Simone wouldn't stop there. I was right. 2 days later, I was working in my rose garden, my mother's pride and joy, the garden I'd maintained for decades, when a car pulled into my driveway. Not the Mercedes or the Lexus. A navy blue sedan with official-looking plates. A man in his 60s got out, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. He had the look of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any room. "Mrs. Whitmore," he called out. "I'm Harrison Blackwood, attorney for your son Daniel. Do you have a moment to speak?" I stood up slowly, removing my gardening gloves. "I have an attorney, Mr. Blackwood. You should speak with her." "I'm well aware of Ms. Reeves' representation," Blackwood said, walking closer. He had a smooth, practiced voice that probably worked well in courtrooms. "I just wanted to have a brief, informal conversation with you. Off the record. Just two reasonable people discussing a difficult situation." "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "Your client is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can steal my house." Blackwood smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Now, Mrs. Whitmore, that's quite an accusation. Your son is concerned about your welfare. He loves you very much. If my son loved me, he wouldn't be doing this. Sometimes love means making difficult decisions for people who can't make them for themselves," Blackwood continued smoothly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've been practicing elder law for 30 years. I've handled hundreds of conservatorship cases. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that the court is going to side with Daniel." "Based on what?" "I've been evaluated by a qualified psychiatrist who found no impairment. Adult Protective Services found no evidence of neglect. Your client's own expert has withdrawn her affidavit because it was based on false information." Blackwood's smile tightened. "You've been busy. That's good. It shows you're still capable of organizing a defense. But Mrs. Whitmore, let me explain something to you about how these cases work. Judges have tremendous discretion in conservatorship proceedings. They don't need proof of complete incapacity. They just need to believe that appointing a conservator is in your best interest." "In my best interest? Or in Daniel's financial interest? The court will hear that you're 70 years old, living alone in a house you can't afford to maintain, depleting your savings at an alarming rate, and refusing reasonable alternatives that would secure your future. They'll hear from your son, a successful businessman who's willing to take on the responsibility of managing your affairs. Who do you think the judge is going to trust?" I felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality," Blackwood said. "Mrs. Whitmore, I'm going to be very direct with you because I think you appreciate honesty. You're going to lose this case. Not because you're incompetent, although we will make that argument, but because the law is designed to protect elderly people from themselves. Even if you're sharp as a tack right now, the court is going to look ahead 5 years, 10 years, and ask, what happens when she does decline? Better to have protections in place now." "Better for whom?" I asked. "Certainly not better for me. Better for everyone," Blackwood said. "Now, your attorney has filed a motion to dismiss based on allegations of fraud and bad faith. That motion is going to fail, Mrs. Whitmore. I've already filed our response, and I can assure you the judge will not be impressed by conspiracy theories about financial motivations. They're not theories. I have evidence. You have emails that can be interpreted multiple ways. You have claims about offshore accounts that have nothing to do with this proceeding. You have a withdrawn affidavit from a doctor who will testify that she made an honest mistake based on the information provided to her. None of it changes the fundamental question. Are you, at 70 years old, making sound decisions about your welfare? He pulled a document from his briefcase and held it out to me. This is a settlement offer. Daniel is willing to withdraw the conservatorship petition if you voluntarily agree to transfer the Whitmore estate to him and move to Riverside Meadows. All costs of your care will be covered. You'll have a generous monthly allowance. You'll retain control over your personal decisions. You just won't have the burden of managing property and finances. I didn't take the document. You mean I'll be pushed into a nursing home while Daniel and his mistress steal my family legacy? Ms. Carrington is your son's fiancée, and she'll be his wife by spring. She'll be family, Mrs. Whitmore. More importantly, she'll be the one living in that house, raising children there, creating new memories. Isn't that better than you rattling around alone in 12,000 square feet, draining your savings to pay for upkeep on a property that's really too much for any one person? Get off my property, I said quietly. Blackwood sighed, tucking the document back into his briefcase. I tried, Mrs. Whitmore. I tried to resolve this amicably. When we win at the hearing, and we will win, remember that you had a chance to do this with dignity. Remember that you chose the hard way. He walked back to his car, but paused before getting in. One more thing. My investigator has been looking into your activities. Did you know that you failed to signal when turning left out of your driveway last Tuesday? And that you were parked in a no-parking zone outside the pharmacy on Thursday? Small things, perhaps, but they paint a picture of someone whose judgment and attention to detail are slipping. The court will hear about these things. After he left, I went back inside and immediately called Catherine. He's trying to intimidate you, Catherine said after I described the visit. That's all this was. He thinks he can scare you into settling. What if he's right, Catherine? What if the judge does side with Daniel regardless of the evidence? Then we appeal. And we keep fighting. But Margaret, you have to trust me. We have a strong case. The withdrawn affidavit alone is huge. It shows Daniel lied to a medical professional. Combined with the emails showing premeditation, the APS report clearing you, Dr. Chen's evaluation, we have plenty of ammunition. But Blackwood said. Blackwood is doing his job, which is to make you doubt yourself. Don't let him. We're 3 weeks out from the hearing. We use that time to build the strongest possible case. And Margaret? It's time to start gathering character witnesses. People who can testify about your competence and Daniel's motivations. Over the next week, Catherine and I worked on identifying people who could testify on my behalf. There was Elizabeth Thornton, the director of the Millbrook Historical Society, where I volunteered twice a week, giving tours and cataloging archives. There was Father Michael O'Brien from St. Catherine's Church, where I'd been a member for 40 years. There was my primary care physician, Dr. Sarah Klein, who could testify about my physical and mental health. There was my accountant, Robert Fong, who could speak to my financial management skills. But the most important potential witness was someone I'd been avoiding thinking about, my grandchildren. Daniel and Claire's 3 children, Emily, 17, Jacob, 14, and Sophie, 11, were the innocent victims in all of this. They'd already lost their intact family when Daniel left. Now they were caught in the middle of this legal battle. I hadn't seen them since before the divorce. Daniel had made excuses about why family visits weren't happening. Now I understood why. He'd been systematically isolating me, building the narrative that I was alone and vulnerable. One evening, as I was reviewing depositions in my home office, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Grandma? My heart stopped. Emily? Yeah, it's me. My oldest granddaughter's voice was tentative, uncertain. I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from Mom. Of course it's okay, sweetheart. It's wonderful to hear your voice. How are you? There was a pause, and then Emily said in a rush, Grandma, I need to tell you something. About Dad and what he's doing. Mom said I shouldn't get involved, but I can't just sit here and let this happen. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Emily, you don't have to. Dad's lying, Emily interrupted. About you, about why he's doing this. He told us you were getting confused, that you needed help, that this was all for your own good. But then I heard him and Simone talking. They thought I was asleep, but I heard them through the wall. She was talking about redecorating your house, about which rooms would be the master suite, about knocking down walls. They were planning it like it was already theirs. Oh, Emily. And there's more. Dad's been taking money from Jacob's college fund. Not a lot, like a few hundred here and there, but enough that I noticed when I was helping Mom with the accounts. When I asked him about it, he said it was just temporary, that he'd pay it back. But Grandma, if he's stealing from his own kids, what's he going to do to you? I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. Emily, I need you to know that whatever happens between your father and me, it doesn't change how much I love you and your brother and sister. I know that, Grandma. That's why I want to help. I'm almost 18. I can testify at the hearing if you need me to. I can tell the judge that Dad's lying, that you're not confused or incompetent. I've been keeping a journal of everything I've heard and seen. Dates, conversations, everything. Your father would never forgive you, I said gently. I don't care, Emily said, and I heard steel in her voice that reminded me of myself at that age. He's the one doing something wrong, not me. And Grandma? Sophie and Jacob know what's happening too. We all want to help. We miss you. We want to see you again. And we don't want to live in your house while you're pushed into some nursing home. That's not right. We talked for another 20 minutes, and by the time we hung up, I was crying openly. My grandchildren, my beautiful, brave grandchildren, were willing to stand up for me. Even against their own father. The next day, I told Catherine about Emily's call. Having her testify would be incredibly powerful, Catherine said carefully. But Margaret, you need to be sure about this. If Emily takes the stand against her father, it will destroy their relationship. Maybe permanently. Are you willing to do that to them? I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I said, what I'm not willing to do is teach my grandchildren that it's okay to steal from family. That it's okay to lie and manipulate and push elderly people out of their homes. If the price of stopping Daniel is a temporary rift with his children, that's a price I have to pay. Because if I don't fight this, what kind of example am I setting for them? Then we'll include Emily in our witness list, Catherine said. But we should talk to Claire first. Get her blessing, even if she's not willing to testify herself. I arranged to meet Claire at a coffee shop in Oakwood Estates, far enough from Millbrook Heights that we were unlikely to run into anyone we knew. I hadn't seen my former daughter-in-law since the divorce, and I was shocked by how worn she looked. Claire had always been vibrant and energetic, but the woman who sat across from me looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and new lines around her mouth. Margaret, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. I'm so sorry. About everything. About Daniel, about not warning you sooner, about all of it. You have nothing to apologize for, I said firmly. You're a victim in this too. Emily told me she called you, Claire said. She's determined to testify. I tried to talk her out of it, but she's stubborn. Reminds me of someone. She smiled slightly. She reminds me of her grandmother, I said. My mother. Strong-willed and principled to a fault. Margaret, I need you to understand something. If Emily testifies, Daniel will retaliate. He'll make her life hell. He might even try to restrict her visitation with him, claim she's been poisoned against him. It could get ugly. It's already ugly, I said. The question is whether we're going to stand up to him or let him steamroll everyone who gets in his way. Claire was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee. Finally, she looked up at me with determination in her eyes. I want to testify too. Claire, no. Emily told me about the custody threats. Screw the custody threats, Claire said with sudden fierceness. I've been a coward, Margaret. I've been so focused on protecting myself and the kids that I've let Daniel get away with things I should have reported to the authorities. But watching him do this to you, watching him try to steal from his own mother, I can't stay silent anymore. He needs to be stopped. What about the children? They'll be fine. They're strong kids, and they know right from wrong. Emily's already decided to speak up. If I stay silent now, what message does that send her? That it's okay to back down from bullies? That family loyalty means protecting people who do terrible things? Over the next hour, Claire told me things about her marriage that made my blood run cold. How Daniel had opened credit cards in her name without telling her. How he'd hidden money from their business accounts. How he'd gaslit her about their finances, making her think she was bad with money when really he was the one mismanaging everything. How when she'd finally confronted him about the affair with Simone, he'd tried to convince her she was crazy, paranoid, imagining things. The worst part, Claire said, is that I believed him for so long. I thought I was the problem. It wasn't until I hired a lawyer and started getting real financial information that I realized how much he'd been lying. That's what abusers do, I said. They make you doubt yourself. Exactly. And that's what he's trying to do to you now. Convince everyone, including you, that you're incompetent and need to be controlled. But I know you, Margaret. You're one of the strongest, most capable people I've ever met. If you can't manage your own life at 70, then none of us can manage ours. When I left the coffee shop, I had Claire's commitment to testify. More than that, I had detailed information about Daniel's pattern of financial abuse and manipulation. It was more ammunition for Catherine to use. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Daniel and Simone were smart. They'd been planning this for months. They had Harrison Blackwood, who'd won 50 conservatorship cases. They had resources I didn't have. What if, despite all our evidence and preparation, it wasn't enough? That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the Whitmore estate, room by room, touching the walls, looking at the family photographs, remembering. My great-grandfather's study where he'd conducted his business. My grandmother's sunroom where she'd taught me to knit. My mother's rose garden visible through the windows. Theodore's workshop in the carriage house. For generations of memories. For generations of love and life and family. And my son wanted to take it all away so his mistress could play house. I found myself in the attic at 2 a.m, surrounded by boxes and trunks filled with family history. Photo albums. Letters. Documents. The accumulated evidence of a century and a half of Whitmore family existence. That's when I found it. A leather portfolio tucked away in an old steamer trunk, labeled in my great-grandfather Cornelius's distinctive handwriting, estate documents, original deed and family trust. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was the original 1889 deed to the property, signed by Cornelius Whitmore. But beneath it was something I'd never known existed, a family trust document, dated 1920, signed by both Cornelius and my grandmother Beatrice. I read through it slowly, my legal knowledge limited but my understanding growing with each paragraph. The document established that the Whitmore estate was to be held in trust for the Whitmore family in perpetuity. It couldn't be sold outside the family. It could only be transferred to direct descendants who agreed to maintain it and preserve it for future generations. And most importantly, any transfer had to be voluntary and witnessed by an attorney to ensure it wasn't made under duress. There was more. The trust included a provision that if any Whitmore heir attempted to force another family member off the property through legal action or coercion, they would forfeit their claim to the estate entirely. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the documents. This changed everything. If this trust was still legally valid, and I had no reason to think it wasn't, then Daniel couldn't force me to transfer the property even if he won the conservatorship case. The trust provisions would override any conservatorship order. More than that, by filing the petition and trying to force me out, Daniel might have already forfeited his inheritance entirely. I gathered up the documents and took them downstairs. At 2:30 a.m, I sent an email to Catherine with photos of everything I'd found, subject line, urgent, found family trust documents that may invalidate entire petition. Her response came 10 minutes later. Holy shit. Bring those to my office first thing tomorrow. If these are valid, we just won the case. I barely slept that night, adrenaline and hope and relief coursing through my system. When dawn finally came, I was showered, dressed, and waiting at Catherine's office door before she even arrived. She took one look at the original documents and immediately called in Marcus and another attorney, a trust and estate specialist named Linda Wu. This is legitimate, Linda said after examining the papers for 20 minutes. The trust was properly executed and recorded with the county. And it's never been dissolved or superseded. Mrs. Whitmore, this trust is still controlling. These provisions are enforceable. So Daniel can't force me to transfer the property? I asked. He can't force you, and more importantly, his attempt to do so through the conservatorship petition has likely triggered the forfeiture clause. According to this provision, any heir who uses legal coercion to attempt to remove another family member from the property automatically forfeits their claim to inherit. I sank into a chair, the full implications hitting me. So even if I died tomorrow, Daniel couldn't inherit the estate? Not under the terms of this trust. The property would skip to the next generation, your grandchildren. And because of the anti-coercion clause, Daniel would be explicitly excluded. Catherine was grinning like a cat with cream. Margaret, do you understand what this means? Not only do we have a complete defense to the conservatorship petition, but we have grounds to file a counterclaim. We can ask the court to enforce the forfeiture clause and formally declare that Daniel has lost any right to inherit the property. Can we do that? I asked. Can we really take away his inheritance? He took it away himself, Linda Wu said. The moment he filed that petition trying to force you off the property, he violated the terms of the trust. We're just asking the court to recognize and enforce what's already happened under the trust provisions. Over the next 3 days, Catherine and her team worked non-stop to incorporate this new information into our defense. They filed an amended response to the conservatorship petition, citing the trust provisions. They filed a separate motion asking the court to enforce the forfeiture clause. And they subpoenaed the original county records to prove the trust had been properly recorded and never dissolved. The hearing was now less than 2 weeks away, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we might actually win. But Daniel and Simone weren't going to give up without a fight. And their next move was the dirtiest one yet. 1 week before the hearing, I received a summons to appear for a deposition. Harrison Blackwood wanted to question me under oath about my mental state, my daily activities, my finances, everything. This is standard procedure, Catherine assured me. They're trying to find weaknesses in your testimony before the hearing. Just answer honestly and don't let Blackwood rattle you. He's going to try to make you look confused or forgetful. Stay calm, stay clear, and if you don't understand a question, say so. The deposition was scheduled at Blackwood's office, a sleek modern space in downtown Millbrook Heights that screamed expensive. When I arrived with Catherine, we were ushered into a conference room where Harrison Blackwood was waiting with a court reporter and a video camera. And sitting next to Blackwood was Daniel. I hadn't seen my son in person since the day he and Simone had come to my house to demand I sign over the property. He looked older somehow, with new lines around his eyes and gray at his temples. He wouldn't meet my gaze. Let's begin, Blackwood said once everyone was settled and the court reporter had sworn me in. Mrs. Whitmore, could you please state your full name and age for the record? Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 70 years old. And where do you currently reside? 1847 Magnolia Boulevard, Millbrook Heights. The Whitmore Estate. How long have you lived at that address? 45 years. Since I married my husband Theodore. Blackwood nodded, making notes. Mrs. Whitmore, I'd like to ask you about your daily routine. What time do you typically wake up in the morning? The question started innocuous enough. What time did I wake up? What did I eat for breakfast? How did I spend my days? But gradually, they became more pointed. Mrs. Whitmore, do you sometimes forget what day of the week it is? Sometimes, if I haven't looked at a calendar. I think most people do. Do you ever go into a room and forget why you went there? Occasionally. Again, I think that's pretty normal. Have you ever forgotten to pay a bill? Not that I recall. But you might have forgotten and not remembered? Catherine interjected, asked and answered. Move on, counselor. Blackwood smiled slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, how much are your monthly expenses for maintaining the Whitmore estate? It varies, but approximately $8,000 per month. And how much income do you receive monthly? About $6,500 from Social Security and investment dividends. So you're operating at a deficit of $1,500 per month? Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on repairs and maintenance needs. Over the course of a year, you're spending approximately $18,000 more than you're taking in. Is that correct? Yes, but I have savings. How much do you have in liquid savings, Mrs. Whitmore? I hesitated, looking at Catherine, who nodded. Approximately $240,000. And at your current rate of spending, that would be depleted in approximately 13 years, correct? If nothing changed, yes, but you're 70 years old, Mrs. Whitmore. Statistically, you have perhaps 15 to 20 years left. Are you planning to live in poverty for the last years of your life? I'm planning to manage my resources responsibly, I said firmly. And if necessary, I can reduce expenses or sell some assets. What assets? The house is your primary asset, and under the terms of the trust you've recently claimed exists, you can't sell it. So what exactly will you liquidate when your savings run out? I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady. I have investment accounts, retirement funds, personal property. Personal property that's been in your family for generations? Your great-grandfather's furniture? Your grandmother's jewelry? You'll sell family heirlooms to pay for upkeep on a house that's too big for you? Mr. Blackwood, Catherine said sharply, you're arguing with the witness, not questioning her. Sustained, Blackwood said with a slight smile, knowing he'd made his point. He consulted his notes. Mrs. Whitmore, let's talk about the trust document you recently discovered. Isn't it convenient that you found this document just weeks before a hearing where your son is seeking to protect you from financial ruin? I didn't know it existed, I said. It was in the attic, in a trunk I hadn't opened in years. And yet you happened to find it at exactly the right moment. Some might say suspiciously convenient timing. Some might say I was motivated to search through family records when my son tried to steal my house. I shot back. Daniel flinched at that, and for just a moment, our eyes met across the table. I saw something there, shame, maybe, or regret, but it was gone in an instant. The deposition went on for 3 more hours. Blackwood questioned me about every aspect of my life, trying to find inconsistencies, trying to make me look confused or forgetful. But I held my ground, answering each question clearly and calmly. Finally, Blackwood said, I have no further questions at this time. He looked at Daniel. Would you like to add anything? Daniel had been silent throughout the entire deposition, just watching and listening. Now he cleared his throat and said quietly, Mom, this doesn't have to be this way. If you would just listen to reason. Reason? I felt my composure crack. You call trying to have me declared incompetent reasonable? You call lying to doctors and filing false petitions reasonable? You call stealing from your own mother reasonable? I'm not stealing anything. Daniel's voice rose. I'm trying to protect you from yourself. But you're too stubborn to see that you need help. What I need is a son who respects me enough to let me live my own life. I shot back. What I need is family who doesn't see me as an obstacle to be removed. That's enough, Blackwood interjected. This deposition is concluded. Catherine and I left immediately, but not before I heard Daniel say to Blackwood, see? This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's paranoid, accusatory, completely unreasonable. In Catherine's car, I finally let myself cry. What if Blackwood's right? I said. What if the judge looks at the numbers and decides I really can't afford the house? What if the trust doesn't matter because they decide I need protection anyway? Margaret, listen to me, Catherine said firmly. You were brilliant in there. You were clear, articulate, and completely in control. Yes, Blackwood scored some points on the financial issues, but that's not enough to justify conservatorship. And the trust changes everything. Even if the judge has concerns about your finances, he can't override the trust provisions that protect you from being forced off the property. But Daniel will keep fighting, I said. Even if we win this hearing, he'll appeal, or he'll find some other way to come after the house. Maybe, Catherine acknowledged. But every time he tries, he's going to run into the same problem, the trust provisions that his. The morning of the hearing arrived with unseasonable cold. I woke at 5 a.m., unable to sleep, and dressed in my best navy suit, the same one I'd worn to Theodore's funeral. It felt appropriate somehow. I was burying one version of my relationship with my son and hoping something better might emerge from the ashes. Catherine picked me up at 8. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the Riverside County Superior Court. As we drove through the familiar streets of Millbrook Heights, I watched the town where I'd spent most of my life pass by the window and wondered if this would be one of my last days as a free woman with control over her own destiny. The courthouse was an imposing building of granite and marble, built in the 1920s with soaring ceilings and columns that made everyone who entered feel small. Catherine had warned me that Judge Howard Brennan was known for being fair but conservative, with a tendency to err on the side of protection when it came to elderly people. He's appointed conservators in cases where I personally thought they weren't necessary, Catherine had told me. But he's also ruled against conservatorship when he smelled financial manipulation. He's going to be our wild card. In the courtroom, Daniel was already seated at the plaintiff's table with Harrison, Blackwood, and Simone. My son looked haggard, like he hadn't slept much either. Simone, by contrast, looked immaculate in a cream-colored dress suit that probably cost more than my car payment, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd planned every detail of her ascension to Lady of the Manor. Behind them in the gallery, I was surprised to see Claire sitting with Emily, Jacob, and Sophie. My grandchildren. All three of them gave me small, encouraging waves. Claire nodded at me with grim determination. Judge Brennan entered at precisely 10 o'clock. He was a man in his late 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He settled behind the bench and surveyed the courtroom. "Good morning," he said. "We're here today on the matter of the conservatorship petition of Daniel Theodore Whitmore regarding his mother, Margaret Eleanor Whitmore. I've reviewed all the pleadings, including the very interesting trust document that was recently introduced into evidence. Mr. Blackwood, you may proceed with your opening statement." Blackwood stood, buttoning his suit jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is about a loving son trying to protect his elderly mother from financial ruin and the consequences of declining judgment. Mrs. Margaret Whitmore is 70 years old and living alone in a 12,000 square foot house that costs approximately $100,000 annually to maintain. She is spending nearly $18,000 more per year than her income provides. At this rate, her savings will be depleted within 13 years, leaving her destitute in her 80s. He painted a picture of me as a stubborn old woman clinging to a house I couldn't afford, refusing reasonable alternatives, heading toward inevitable poverty. He cited my isolation, my refusal of assistance, my emotional volatility, as demonstrated in the deposition. Your Honor, Blackwood concluded, conservatorship is not a punishment. It's a protection. My client seeks only to ensure his mother's welfare and financial security. He's willing to take on the considerable burden of managing her affairs, ensuring she has quality care, and preserving what remains of her estate for her benefit. We ask the court to grant this petition. Catherine stood for our response. Your Honor, what Mr. Blackwood describes as protection is actually theft disguised as concern. The evidence will show that Mr. Whitmore and his fiancée, Ms. Simone Carrington Derringer, have been planning for months to take control of Mrs. Whitmore's property, specifically the historic Whitmore estate, for their own use. They want to install themselves in that house while forcing Mrs. Whitmore into a senior living facility against her will. She laid out our case methodically. The emails showing premeditation. The false affidavit from Dr. Velasquez, obtained through Daniel's lies about my having dementia. The APS investigation that found no evidence of self-neglect. Dr. Chen's evaluation finding me completely competent. And most importantly, the trust document that explicitly protected me from exactly this kind of coercion. Your Honor, the Whitmore Family Trust, established in 1920 and properly recorded with this county, contains a specific anti-coercion provision. Any family member who attempts to force another family member off the property through legal action forfeits their claim to the estate. By filing this petition, Mr. Whitmore has violated that provision and disqualified himself from ever inheriting the property. Judge Brennan looked up sharply. That's quite an accusation, Ms. Reeves. It's not an accusation, Your Honor. It's a statement of fact based on the clear language of the trust document. We've submitted a motion asking the court to enforce the forfeiture provision. I'm aware of your motion, the judge said dryly. Mr. Blackwood, I'm interested in hearing your response to these allegations of premeditation and financial motivation. Blackwood stood again. Your Honor, the emails Ms. Reeves references are simply discussions between my client and his fiancée about long-term family planning. There's nothing sinister about a son and his future wife discussing what might happen with family property in the future. As for the trust document, we dispute its current validity and relevance. Furthermore, even if the trust is valid, it doesn't prevent appropriate conservatorship proceedings when a family member genuinely needs protection. The judge nodded. We'll hear testimony and make that determination. Call your first witness, Mr. Blackwood. Blackwood called Daniel to the stand. My son took the oath and sat down, still not looking at me. Mr. Whitmore, can you describe your relationship with your mother? It's complicated, Daniel said quietly. I love my mother very much. But over the past few years, especially since my father died, I've watched her struggle. The house is too much for her. She won't admit it, but I can see how it's wearing her down. Can you give specific examples? The gardens are overgrown in places. There are repairs that need to be done that she keeps putting off because of the cost. She's mentioned several times that she's worried about money. And emotionally, she's become more isolated, more defensive when I try to help. Did you try to help her before filing this petition? Many times. I offered to hire help for the house and grounds. She refused. I suggested she might be happier in a community with other people her age. She got angry. I offered to help manage her finances, to look for ways to reduce her costs. She accused me of trying to steal from her. Blackwood nodded sympathetically. That must have been difficult. It was heartbreaking, Daniel said, and I could hear genuine emotion in his voice. I watched my mother become more and more paranoid, more convinced that everyone was out to get her property. That's when I realized she might need more help than I could provide informally. Catherine stood for cross-examination. Mr. Whitmore, you testified that you love your mother very much. Is that correct? Yes. Yet you filed a petition claiming she's mentally incompetent based on an affidavit from a doctor who never examined her. A doctor you lied to about your mother having dementia. Is that your idea of love? Daniel's face flushed. I didn't lie. I described her symptoms. Symptoms she didn't have. Dr. Velasquez has withdrawn her affidavit and apologized to your mother for being misled. Are you now claiming Dr. Velasquez is mistaken about her own assessment? I may have misunderstood what she needed to know. Or you deliberately misrepresented your mother's condition to get an affidavit supporting your petition. Catherine didn't wait for an answer. Mr. Whitmore, isn't it true that you and Ms. Carrington-Derringer have been planning to take possession of the Whitmore estate for your own use? We've discussed the possibility of living there someday, yes. It's the family home. Let me show you an email you sent to Ms. Carrington-Derringer 8 months ago. Catherine projected it on the courtroom screen. You wrote, "We need to get the Whitmore estate. That's the key to everything." What did you mean by that? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Just that the house has always been important to our family. And in another email, you wrote, "If I can't convince Mom to move voluntarily, we might need to explore other options." What other options were you referring to? Legal options to protect her. Like declaring her incompetent so you could take control of her assets? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Mr. Whitmore? Catherine's voice was sharp. Because it certainly sounds like you and Ms. Carrington Derringer have been scheming for months to force your mother out of her home so you could take it for yourselves. Objection. Blackwood stood. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Brennan said. Ms. Reeves, ask questions, don't make speeches. Catherine nodded. Mr. Whitmore, how much money do you currently have in offshore accounts? Daniel's face went white. I don't see how that's relevant. Answer the question, Mr. Whitmore, the judge said. Approximately $400,000. A murmur went through the courtroom. Catherine continued, $400,000 that you hid from your wife during your divorce proceedings. $400,000 you told the court didn't exist. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? I had legitimate business reasons. You committed fraud, didn't you, Mr. Whitmore? You hid assets from the court and from your wife. Just like you're trying to steal assets from your mother now. I'm not stealing anything. Daniel's composure cracked completely. I'm trying to save her from herself. She's going to lose everything because she's too stubborn to face reality. Or maybe, Catherine said quietly, she's refusing to hand over her home to a son who's demonstrated a pattern of financial dishonesty and manipulation. Catherine called witness after witness. Dr. Chen testified about my perfect cognitive function. Elizabeth Thornton from the Historical Society spoke about my twice-weekly volunteer work cataloging archives and giving tours. Father O'Brien described my active involvement in church activities. Linda Ramirez from Adult Protective Services testified that she found no evidence of self-neglect or diminished capacity. Then Catherine called Emily. My 17-year-old granddaughter walked to the witness stand with her head held high, though I could see her hands trembling. She took the oath and sat down, finally looking at her father. Daniel's face was anguished. Emily, how long have you known your grandmother? Catherine asked gently. My whole life. She's been there for every birthday, every holiday, every important moment. How would you describe her mental state? She's sharp as anyone I know. She helps me with my college applications, we talk about books and politics, she remembers every detail of our conversations. There's nothing wrong with her mind. Have you overheard conversations between your father and Ms. Carrington Derringer about your grandmother? Emily took a breath. Yes. They'd been planning to take Grandma's house for months. I heard Simone talking about redecorating, about which rooms she wanted to change, about knocking down walls. They were talking about it like it was already theirs. How did that make you feel? Angry, Emily said, her voice strengthening. And sad. Because my grandmother raised my dad in that house. She gave him everything. And now he's trying to steal from her and pretend it's for her own good. When Emily finished, Daniel was crying silently at the plaintiff's table. Simone sat rigid beside him, her perfect composure finally cracking. Judge Brennan called a recess, and when we reconvened, he had clearly made his decision. I've heard enough testimony, he said. This case has troubled me from the beginning, but the evidence presented today has made things very clear. Mrs. Whitmore is demonstrably competent. Multiple professionals have evaluated her and found no cognitive impairment. She maintains an active social life, volunteers regularly, manages her own affairs. The Adult Protective Services investigation found no concerns whatsoever. He looked at Daniel sternly. Mr. Whitmore, the evidence shows that your petition was motivated not by concern for your mother's welfare, but by your desire to obtain control of valuable property. You obtained a false affidavit through misrepresentation. You've demonstrated a pattern of financial dishonesty. And you've caused significant emotional distress to your mother and your own children. He turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, I want to address the financial concerns that have been raised. You are living beyond your current income, and at some point, that will become unsustainable. However, that's your decision to make as a competent adult. If you choose to spend your savings maintaining a house you love, that's your right. Poor financial planning is not grounds for conservatorship. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I thought I might faint. The petition for conservatorship is denied, Judge Brennan said. Furthermore, I'm granting the motion to enforce the forfeiture provision of the Whitmore Family Trust. Mr. Whitmore, by filing this coercive legal action, you have triggered the anti-coercion clause. You are hereby barred from inheriting any interest in the Whitmore estate. Upon Mrs. Whitmore's death, the property will pass directly to her grandchildren as specified in the trust. Daniel made a strangled sound. Simone stood abruptly and walked out of the courtroom, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. This case is concluded, the judge said, and brought down his gavel. Catherine hugged me as I cried with relief. Behind us, I heard Emily and her siblings celebrating quietly. Claire was crying too. Daniel sat at the plaintiff's table, his head in his hands. Harrison Blackwood was packing up his briefcase, his expression carefully neutral. I walked over to my son. He looked up at me with red eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." Simone, she made it all seem so reasonable, so necessary. But I should have known better. I should have protected you, not attacked you. "Yes, you should have," I said quietly. "You betrayed me, Daniel. You tried to steal from me and dress it up as love. I don't know if I can ever forgive that." "I understand," he said. "And I don't blame you." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who was once my baby boy. "But I'm going to try," I said finally. "Because you're still my son. And because your children deserve to have a father who's better than the man you've been. It's going to take time. A lot of time. And you're going to have to prove you've changed. But I'm going to try." 3 months later, I stood in my rose garden on a bright October morning, pruning the bushes as the autumn sun warmed my face. The Whitmore estate was mine, now and forever, protected by the trust that my great-grandfather had wisely established a century ago. Daniel had broken off his engagement to Simone 2 weeks after the hearing. I'd heard through Claire that Simone had left town entirely, moving to California to find her next victim. Daniel had started therapy and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with his children. He'd asked to visit the following week, just him, to see me and apologize properly. I'd agreed. Not because I'd forgiven him, that would take much longer, but because I was choosing to leave the door open for redemption. My grandchildren visited every Sunday now. Emily had been accepted to her top-choice college. Jacob was talking about studying architecture like his father once had. Sophie still believed in happy endings. And me? At 70 years old, I'd learned that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who stands beside you when the people who should protect you become your greatest threat. Catherine had become a dear friend. Claire was like a daughter to me now, more than Daniel had been a son in recent years. But most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger than I ever knew. That I could fight for what was mine and win. That age didn't make me weak or incompetent or easy to manipulate. I was Margaret Eleanor Whitmore, heir to 4 generations of family history, guardian of a legacy built on timber and determination. I had survived my son's betrayal and emerged victorious. And I was going to live in my house, surrounded by my roses and memories and the ghosts of the family who came before me, for as many years as I had left. They had said I wasn't family anymore, that I should step aside and disappear. Instead, I'd taken my family name off the deed, off Daniel's future, anyway, and given it to the grandchildren who truly deserved it. And I was finally, truly, free.